everyone, Marco Montemagno here, founder of the Tech Alchemist. Hello, and today here with me, Alberto Savoia from San Francisco. You there, Alberto, now?
Mountain View.
Oh, Mountain View, right.
California.
Oh, Alberto, thank you so much for being here today. And it's always great to see some Italians doing great things all over the world, and you are one of those people that I really appreciate. I've been discovering your work recently, but I was really fascinated by your pretotyping, not prototyping, but pretotyping work, which is is now an ebook, but I would say can or maybe is or will become a movement. So I think it's very interesting for everyone doing business, and so I want to understand a little bit more. But first I would like to understand your story, because you've been working in Google really in the beginning, and it's always very intriguing, you know, for businesses understand what was Google in the beginning. So how did you start there?
Well, I was born in Rome, Italy, but when I visited California and Silicon Valley, I realized that, just like there are men who say they're born in a woman's body or vice versa, I think I was a Silicon Valley person born in an Italian body. So when I arrived in Silicon Valley, I thought, this is the place for me. And I went for a vacation, and then I decided to stay. So over the years, I was always interested in programming and technology. And I've been very lucky. I ended up at Sun Microsystems in the early days, and I had a good career there. And then I left. I did a startup that went very well. And so after we sold that startup, I thought, what am I going to do? And some of my friends were at Google, so I went there and had an interview there. Probably the toughest job interview of my life. Very technical. They still do that. And I was fortunate enough. After 3 months, they said, there is this little idea we want to do called AdWords. And they wanted what they said, senior supervision or adult supervision. And I never kind of saw myself as adult supervision, but I kind of accepted the role. And that happened to be at the time that AdWords was launching. So even though, of course, it's a work of many, many more people, I was glad to be there at a crucial time in a product that now makes billions each quarter.
Just curious, and then I want to talk about prototyping. But how was working on such an amazing, successful product, which was in the end AdWords? I mean, is the one of the most interesting and is a huge business for Google, but it was really an amazing invention, and then everything started out of it. How was, being there from the beginning on this kind of product?
Well, at the time, you never realize it, right? Because at the time, Google was still in just one building. There were two senior managers, myself and the VP of engineering, and we knew it was going to be big. I don't think even the biggest optimist thought that it was going to be this big and last this long. And I think the credit goes to the people that actually have taken this initial product, which was a first product, and actually have grown it to the scale that it has now. But at the time, you don't realize it. I just remember a lot of work, just being busy. You don't even think about 10 years in the future. You're just trying to make sure that the whole system is launched and it doesn't crash.
All right. So, Alberto, let's talk about pretotyping. I was preparing the chat with you, the interview with you, and I was talking with a friend, and I say, I'm going to do an interview with this man. He's writing and talking about pretotyping. And my friend say, prototyping, yes, okay, prototyping. I say, no, pretotyping. And it's something different, So, first of all, can you explain our Tech Alchemist people, what is pretotyping all about?
Right. So when you think, everybody knows prototyping, right? And the example that I use is that when the inventor of the Palm Pilot, Jeff Hawkins, had the first idea for the Palm Pilot, he didn't jump immediately and start building something, right, with wires and batteries and displays. Why? Because his previous company, startup called Grid Computers, spent years and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, to develop a product that then when they launched it, nobody actually bought it. It was the wrong form factor, right? And they built the prototype. So what Jeff Hawkins did, he actually took, and if you see the book or the video, actually have images of that, took a block of wood, he put a paper sleeve on it with the user interface for what became the Palm Pilot, and he pretended to use it, right? So, let's assume we want to schedule a meeting. I would say, Marco, do you want to meet next week? Yeah, you say yes, and then I pull out this block of wood and I kind of pretend that it's working, and then if it does work, after a while I realize, if this was more than a block of wood, if this actually worked, I would use it all the time. So that was a problem with his other product. He built it, it had all the functionality, but he wasn't using it. So the word pretotype initially started as pretend-o-type. You pretend to have built something to see if you would actually use it. Because, as you know, most new products fail. And most new products fail not because they're not built right? Very few startups fail because they cannot build a product. They fail because they didn't build a product that the market is interested in. Even the people who build it for themselves, they wouldn't use it. So it's very hard to for the market to want it.
Is right to say that with prototyping, I actually have to build something. So I don't know, if I want to do a prototype of a mobile phone, I basically have to try to build at least a basic mobile phone and then say, okay, this is the prototype of my mobile phone. With pretotyping, I can maybe start with something very simple, or a piece of wood or piece of metal, and pretend that this is the mobile phone and explain the features that it should have to.
Look, I'll give you an example, right? Still related to the phone. Clearly, pretotyping only makes sense when you don't know if there is an interest. By now we know that people will buy phones. We know they'll buy tablets, right? So, right now you don't need to pretotype a phone anymore. But maybe you have a new idea for a mobile app. So what you need to do in that case, right? You could spend weeks or months building the perfect app. Let's say one of my favorite was called, that we do at Google in these workshops, called Park Jerk. Sometimes you find people who take 2 parking spots. So you want to do an application, maybe where you take the photos and then you publicly humiliate them on a forum. So look at how this idiot parks. And actually this was developed. So one thing is, I can start writing the application, taking the photos, creating the backend, the database, upload, download, do all the signups and all the stuff. And then maybe I figure out I'm not going to bother with it. Or maybe you just pretend it, right? Maybe you draw the user interface on a piece of paper, you take a photo with the phone, and then as you walk around, you pretend that you actually have this application. And the thing that you need to test the most is, would I actually use this? Because if you don't use it, then it's unlikely other people will use it. And if you look at most of the apps in the App Store, 95% of them don't make any money, right? They have just a few downloads.
Can you do pretotyping only with, you suggest to do pretotyping only with, let's say, analog tool, or there are also digital tools that you can use to create to pretotype your idea?
No, there are some digital tools. By the way, pretotyping, the slogan is, make sure you're building the right it before you build it right. And again, the right it could even be a restaurant, right? I want to do in fact, I have an idea for a restaurant called Tapasta, tapas and pasta. I thought, hey, why not have a place where, you combine the Spanish
Tell me again, Tapasta is great.
Right.
This is genius, Alberto.
Right. So but most restaurants fail. They fail within a year. So I thought, the thing that maybe I want to do is to, how can I test if there is an interest for it? Instead of getting a lease for 2 years in a restaurant, maybe I can advertise. Maybe I can pretend that this restaurant exists. Maybe I can have one of those food trucks. There are many ways that are, before you go for the whole product, there are many tests that you can do. One example, you could buy AdWords. Let's assume that I want to write a book, as I use in my book example, for people who like to watch squirrels, right? We know that there is a market for bird watchers, but maybe there are people that like to watch squirrels. How do I know if these people are around there? I can do some online research, but perhaps I can go to Google AdWords, I buy the keyword squirrels, and when people type squirrel, I can show an ad for my book, The Complete Squirrel Watchers. Even though maybe I've not written the book yet. This is a technique called a fake door, right? So you don't actually have to build the product. Now, clearly you need to be careful with the ethical considerations, because you want people to click, and you can tell them, look, I'm thinking of writing this book. If you're interested, give me your email and I will actually send you a free copy when it's out. I'm doing a market test. Now, so what happens is, if you had to write a book, it would take months, right? And most books, like most apps, like most businesses, like most startups, like most restaurants, like most movies, are not successful. Not because they're not well done in most cases, but because there isn't a market for them. So if you do this, a small number of people pays a very small penalty, by say, through the fake door, by clicking on it. But the public at large gets the reward that people do not spend time building products or applications that are wasted.
And and the price of failure and the cost of failure for you is anyway very low, and you can fail very fast and change, and so it's very smart.
Absolutely, and that's what I've done with my book Pretotype. I gave hundreds of talks on pretotyping at Google. People loved it, and they said, Alberto, write a book. And I thought, oh my God, write a book, it's gonna take months, and you have to sit down alone at a keyboard. Not my idea of fun. So the first thing I did, I bought some AdWords to see if people would be interested in the book. And then when they click on the book on pretotyping, I would say, if you give me the email, I will send you a free copy. So I learned from the funnel, right? How many people click on the ad, how many people give me their email. And so I have an idea that there is a market, that people like the idea. And then the next step I wrote a minimum viable booklet, if you want, a Preto book that I wrote in 1 week, and I put it on Amazon and download to see if people would actually download it. All of these are steps that go, one after the other to validate the idea, right? For a product to be successful, so many things have to go right? It has to be the right product, the right price, the right marketing, the right audience. The competition must not be doing the right things. So the goal is to find out how of these many things, each of which has to be right, can I test, right? And some of them are very easy to test. Imagine you write the book and you plan to sell it via AdWords or on Amazon. Well, maybe you don't have to write the full book and put it on Amazon. So I wrote a 72-page book, and to see if people download it, which shows me that there is an interest.
While you were speaking, Alberto, it's funny because I was thinking that when I launched my company a few years ago, I launched a company called Blogosphere. It was a network of blogs, and then I sold when it was 3.5 million unique visitors a month. And the funny thing is that when I launched it, basically I had nothing. I had no company, I had no blogs, I had no bloggers. But I remember I wrote a post where I said, guys, I will do this, and I will launch a weblog network with 100 bloggers. If you're interested, just write me. But the people thought that behind was something, but it was really nothing. It was just, a landing page, basically. And then I got tons of emails. But I agree with you that ethic is very important. I mean, to match exactly what's the expectation and be very transparent.
That's right. And of course, you cannot use this fake door approach. By the way, this is only one of the many, many pretotyping techniques, right? But it's a very nice, quick and easy one. You cannot use it in all situations. Another favorite story of mine, another pretotyping technique is called the mechanical Turk. And the best way to explain is an example that IBM did many years ago. They wanted to do speech to text because they figured 30 years ago, most people did not type on computers. So they thought, well, we cannot sell personal computers if people cannot speak into them. So that would have taken many, many years and tens of millions in development. The technology wasn't there yet. One could argue even today, it's not working very well. So what did they do? They pretended, they built a pretotype. They put somebody in the room with a screen and a microphone and no keyboard. And they told them, we built a prototype of a speech-to-text translation. So speak into it. And it worked. People spoke and the words appear on the screen as if it was perfect speech-to-text. But they didn't build anything. Another person in a room, a stenographer or a typist, was listening through headphones and would just type for them. So they pretended to have built this device to see if and how people would use it. And what they learned was very interesting is that people thought that everybody would have thought, of course, we want to speak to computers, right? Who wants to type? But in reality, if you try speaking to a computer for several hours a day, your throat gets sore, the room gets very loud. Imagine everybody at Starbucks talking. So what they've learned without building anything with a prototype is that the demand and the idea of speech to text being great, actually when you try it in practice, is not that great.
Could you elaborate more, Alberto, on other prototyping techniques? So minimum viable product first, that it reminds me of Eric Ries's Lean Startup. He is always talking about only this technique. Right. Mechanical Turk, second one. What else?
So we have the fake door. By the way, another entrepreneur named Jesse Helms, I think, invented that term, and we liked it. Fake door. It sounds so real. You know, see if people knock before you actually build something behind that door. MVP, actually, you have to build something, but an MVP has to be viable and a product. So you would agree that the Palm Pilot, the piece of wood prototype, is not viable, not a product. And also what IBM built, unless they plan to put little typists into boxes, was not really a viable product, was more of a test. Another favorite example of mine is Tesla. I don't know if Tesla is as famous in Europe, you know, the electric car company, as it is here. But Elon Musk, right? He's a great guy. I mean, so what they did is, well, you know, how do we start a car company? How do we know that people would even buy? The first car was a Sportster, right? A two-seater that cost $109,000. What do most car companies do? They go to a car show, they build a car, and they ask people, would you buy it? And then people say yes. And then they build, you know, 10,000 of them. And then they end up being failures like, I don't know, I'm not going to name names, right? Because every time I mention a car, somebody said, I had one of those, I loved it. So what did Elon Musk do? He took an existing body, a Lotus Elise. He took off the shell, right? He took off the engine and he replaced it with an electric engine, and he put his own body on it. And then he didn't go and ask people, would you buy this? He actually asked people, if you like this, you give me a $5,000 deposit and I will put you on a waiting list. Now, do you see the difference between these two? Most people think that asking is good market research. No, and that's how you end up with products that you pass all the market research tests, but nobody then buys. Imagine going to the bank and say, hey, people like this car, 98%, versus going to the bank or investors with a sheet of, hey, here are 700 people who gave me a $5,000 deposit, $5,000 to get on the waiting list for the car. That is very strong evidence.
Also for investors is very important because you show traction, you show that there is a very a market there, so it's easier to get investing. And also it's a Kickstarter in the end is having big success because it's engaging immediately the users or the potential buyers from the day one. Okay, so that's very interesting.
Yeah, Kickstarter is a great way to prototype an idea. You know, that's real evidence that somebody wants what you are building.
Yeah, in Europe, I think they will launch now. They didn't start yet because crowdfunding is still a big problem in Europe, but in US it's going really strong. I just would like you to elaborate more on these prototyping techniques because I think they're very, very useful for everyone doing business. And so many times, as you say, we lose money, we lose time, and we get a lot of failures. And we could avoid that with the right prototyping approach. So what else? Other techniques?
Yeah, I think since we're both Italian, this is my favorite example. Mac Spaghetti, right? So we all know McDonald's, famous for, you know, burgers. At some point, they had the idea for Mac Spaghetti. Now, I will not go into actually what happened there, but we actually worked with McDonald's. We did some prototypes with them, and I thought they were going to be offended, but they actually loved the example. So let's assume you're a McDonald's and you want to offer Mac Spaghetti. What are your prototyping techniques? We do this actually in our workshops. What's the simplest thing that you could do? Well, you don't have to cook any pasta. You put it on the menu, and then when people come in the store, they look at it and say, I would like Mac Spaghetti. That tells you if there is a level of interest, right? If nobody asks for it, you don't even bother cooking it, right? So when people ask you, I would like to order Mac Spaghetti, first you would say, are you crazy? No, you would say, okay, I'm sorry, this is just a market test, but here's a coupon. Please order anything else. We're just trying to see if there is an interest. So this is a first pretotyping technique, a fake door. The other thing that a lot of companies, even especially large companies do, they have an idea and they launch it, say, in all the stores and for a long time. So one of the pretotyping techniques we recommend is called the one-night stand, right? If you have an idea like Max Spaghetti, first you test if there is any interest, but then you want to see, would people come back? So you try in a small number of stores, right? And this time, if every time somebody orders it, you make a note and you see how many people, you ask it, have you ordered it before? Because you want to find out if people will order it more than once, right? You can be really misled by a great marketing campaign, right? I can do a great marketing campaign, people are going to try my products, but then what if they don't come back? So we break things into initial level of interest, ILI, and ongoing level of interest. You can test the initial level of interest with a fake door, just put it on the menu and see if people order it. For the ongoing level of interest, you must actually cook some pasta. Hopefully you don't overcook it, you want it al dente. And you run the experiment for, say, 2 months, but just do it in a few stores. And the mistakes a lot of people do is they think they're big, they think they're right, so they do these big launches and then have big failures.
So start small and then scale it if it works and if you have the evidence already that it will work.
That's right, because all my presentations start with the law of failure, and the truth is that most new products fail, right? And the more innovative they are, the greater the chances of failure are. It goes from 80% to 95% chance of failure, depending how new and different it is. So I always go on the assumption, when I do a test, my goal is not to prove that my idea is right, it's to prove that it's wrong. And this sounds strange, right? But it's like if you go in a court of law, you have to prove that you're innocent until proven guilty. But because most products fail, you have to start with the assumption that this product will fail, but let me see if by any chance it's the right product. And it's a very different mindset, but I believe it's the right one to take.
Alberto, a couple of questions more, then I let you go. The first one is, do you have any digital tools that you suggest or recommend for pretotyping? I mean, in prototyping, everyone suggests, wireframing platforms like, Balsamic or this kind of platform where you can create a mock-up or something like that. Is for pretotyping, do you see anything that can be useful?
Because you can pretotype anything from a book, right, to a new car. I think people usually find out their imagination, but what typically happens, I tell them, what's your product? And then I ask them, how would you pretotype it? And they give me an idea. And typically when we work with them and we coach them, we come back with something simpler, right? So for example, with the Max Spaghetti example, the first thing people would say is, oh, we just do it in 2 stores. And I tell them, well, can you do it without cooking any pasta? And then they think for a while and they say, oh yeah, we just put it on the menu. Because right, there isn't that initial level of interest, the ongoing level of interest is also not going to be there. So there are tools, and in the book we discuss several of them. There are definitely tools for metrics, but every case we find is a little unique, and there is a very beautiful pretotype, right? In every large product, inside there is a very clever pretotype, well, almost all the time.
So Alberto, to get pretotyping, is possible to download it from the website, a PDF which is in English, and other translations I know that are coming. Other way to connect with the pretotyping movement?
Yes. So first, good news. I wrote the book in English, and then much to my surprise, people started to do translation. Some of them didn't ask me, say, hey, I have a Spanish translation, and now a Japanese and French translation are in the work, and Leonardo Zangrando in Italy did an Italian translation, which, I speak Italian well, but I've been in the US long enough, I cannot write it well. But it's fun because I read it and actually like it. I could have written with the same language myself. So for all the material, including some videos where I explain all of these ideas, just go to pretotyping or type pretotype into Google or pretotyping. And my official website is pretotypelabs.com. And then there's tons of free material and much more to come, especially in Europe now that we have a lot of people getting busy there.
Excellent. Alberto Savoia, thank you so much. Pretotyping, guys, go there, have a look. Really tons of useful tips and interesting stuff to read and to absorb. Alberto, thanks so much, and good luck
Thank you.
for
It's been a
everything.
lot of fun. Ciao Marco, grazie. May you find the right it.